as you mentioned, this is both fast-moving and unprecedented. So there's a lot here that nobody's quite sure in terms of how it will play out. On the legal side of this, obviously the President has taken the decision that he announced last night, as you outlined, using this justification of for cause. Governor Cook, of course, is pushing back against that and will have her own legal defence against the President's decision. But there is a lot of discussion around what this at cause clause actually means. Does it cover a Fed official's time in office? Does it cover what they did before they went into office? Do the circumstances that are surrounding Ms. Cook at the moment, do they classify, or do they meet the bar for what could be considered at cause? These are questions that I've seen several academics asking this morning and throughout the day, so there's no clear answer on it. There's clearly going to be a whole legal side of this that will take some time to play out in the courts. And then there's the policy side, the practical side, which is on paper. You have critics saying a clear direct attack on the Fed and Fed's independence. It opens up potentially a new seat on the board, presumably for someone who has the same economic view as President Trump, which is one of for lower interest rates. And that in itself feeds through to a very different policy debate in the months ahead in terms of where interest rates are going. So, as I say, the legal side of this, which there seems to be a lot of uncertainty, and that will take its time to play out through the courts. And then there's the implication for policy for the Fed as an institution and the policy side, and where that goes from here as well.
But what legal arguments is Cook's team likely to make in defense of her position? What grounds does she and her team have under existing statutes?
Well, we're waiting to see what that defence will be. Governor Cook has made the point that she will be responding. She will not be bullied out of office. That's been the point she has made before. And her lawyers commented today that they will be mounting their own legal defence in all of this. So, in due process, those details are expected to come out. But clearly, the big talking point is this idea that a governor can be dismissed for at cause. That's hasn't been tested before. There isn't precedent for this, so the definition of that is kind of in the eye of the beholder. Obviously, critics of, in this case, Governor Cook, make the point that it fits that definition. Those who are critical of what the White House is doing, accusing this of being a political witch hunt, make the point that it doesn't. So obviously there's clearly split opinion on that. But that's where the legal argument will probably rest in terms of how at cause is defined and agreed on in the weeks and maybe months ahead through the courts.
And one of the reasons we wanted to speak with you is because you cover the global economy. You understand the role of central banks throughout the world and the distinct role they have in different countries where there isn't necessarily the same precedent of independence from politics that there is in the United States. I'm wondering about global implications for this, or economic implications, perhaps, if the president is successful in removing Lisa Cook.
Oh, it's very important. I mean, if, just for argument's sake, say by the end of this process, it's been agreed that the Fed's independence has been damaged somewhat. It seemed to now be much more within the political realm, at the whim of the White House, for example, as critics say. Well, that sends a powerful signal to the rest of the world, because a lot of these smaller central banks in economies around the world take their lead from the Fed. It's the world's most powerful central bank. It's the standard setter for what has happened in central bank independence over the past few decades. So you could argue there could be a domino effect, and that's certainly what those who are concerned about what's happening with the Fed are saying right now, that if the Fed goes, others will follow. Other politicians, other parliaments, other presidents will pile similar criticism on their central banks. Now, not all central banks are independent. Certainly in the emerging world, they are not. China's obviously being a case in point. But nonetheless, there is academic literature that makes the point that having that central bank operating at arm's length from the electoral cycle, from the political process, has, on balance, been better in terms of the economic results it has returned. Now, to be clear, that's not saying they're not totally removed from democratic oversight. They come under their parliaments, they come under Congress, there are checks and balances, but there's an argument that keeping it that bit at arm's length from the electoral cycle has proven to be better for the economy over time.
Well, we are speaking with Enda Curran. He's a global economy reporter for Bloomberg News. We're also monitoring what's happening in the White House right now, the president having a cabinet meeting. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is speaking now. We will bring you any headlines and updates as we do get them.
And what might be the political motivations behind targeting Lisa Cook specifically? We know that her term is not set to expire until 2038.
Well, again, the White House would say that this is not a political campaign or strategy against the Fed, but plenty of observers and critics make the point that this all feeds into the idea that President Trump wants interest rates to come down much faster than the Fed is signalling, and he wants them down for a variety of reasons, not least to bring down borrowing costs or refinancing costs for the government. And by targeting governors on the board, in this case Ms. Cook, it gives him an opportunity to replace her and put on, as I mentioned earlier, somebody who shares the same economic worldview as President Trump, which would be one for lower interest rates. So remember, it's not just this particular governor's seat that's up for grabs at the moment, or potentially up for a decision. We have former Governor Kugler's seat became vacant a few weeks ago. We have the nomination of Mr. Moran for that from the White House. Then, of course, we have the interview process that's kicking off soon for the Fed chair. If you look over the 6-month window period ahead, there's potentially significant change coming for the personnel who run the Fed, and it's an opportunity for President Trump, of course, to put in appointees to his liking, which by extension would lean towards the view that it could be a dovish board willing to be more accommodating for what the White House wants. That's what all of the concern and critics are saying about this process. As I said, the White House say it's not a political campaign, but there's plenty of skepticism around that.